Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this webinar, which we're going to be running for the next 60 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We have people registered for this webinar all the way from Pakistan through to India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, of course, Singapore, Hong Kong, Perth, Brisbane, Sydney, Auckland, Wellington, and New Zealand. So welcome everyone. I'm really glad that you're going to join us. Hope you're having a great day and excited about the session we're going to be sharing with you. We certainly are. Let me just do some quick intros. My name is Andre Alfonso, as you can see on the screen. I am a director with the Ariel Group. Our company, Ariel, has one focus, and that's transforming good communicators into great communicators. We do that whether it's in person or on screen. On screen is what today is all about. And our focus today has really been a result of our collaboration with this company called MeetBee. I would say MeetBee is one of the leading virtual meeting companies on this planet. Yeah. And the two co-founders of MeetBee are going to be really the experts that are going to be taking you through the session. And that's Mark Chase. Mark is coming to us from the Czech Republic. Hey, Mark, it's 4 o'clock in the morning for you. And you're going to hear a lot from Mark a little bit later on. And we've also got Ilan Ressel coming to you from Johannesburg in South Africa. Hey, Ilan.
Hey, Andre.
5 o'clock in the morning for Ilan. Gentlemen, I hope you are all coffeeed up for us
For sure.
for this session over here. Okay, so let's just do a quick intro to the session. The purpose of the session, the purpose why we're running this is really clear for us. Since we have transitioned into this virtual communication world, we have noticed, clients have said to us that a lot of their client-facing people are forming bad habits in terms of how they use the technology. And unfortunately, those bad habits have become the norm. And what we have in front of us is a huge opportunity to differentiate ourselves when we're talking to our clients by really enhancing on-screen communication. And that's really the purpose of what we're going to be doing today. Ilan and Mark are going to be sharing with you some of the secrets, whatever platform you're in, whether it's Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever else. We're going to be using Zoom today, but it applies across all of the different platforms. By the end of the next 55 minutes or so, we want to leave you with two things. First, we want you to open your eyes to some of the possibilities of using Zoom or Teams or WebEx. And we're going to demo some of those things for you as we go through the next hour or so. But we also want to make sure you take away some actual practical tips and ideas that you can start using straight away. So this isn't about theory necessarily, it's about practical application. And really to try and elevate your on-screen presence so that you differentiate yourself every time you are using one of these platforms. But I want to set some expectations as well. Full disclosure, we're going to be sharing a lot of information with you, but we're only going to be covering about 10% of what's available. We just don't have the time to give it all. We do have a training course, which is really part of what we would love to talk to you about, which will cover the 90% of things we don't cover over here. And that's really something, if you're interested in talking to us, we would love to be able to talk to you because our passion is on trying to get everyone to elevate the standard of communication. Couple of housekeeping things before we start. First of all, you'll notice in the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button right about the center of the Zoom screen. And we want to use your questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible for you, given it's a webinar. But by sharing your questions, is really going to help you learn. Encourage you to make them really hard questions. We're going to have a Q&A right at the end of the session. But keep dropping your questions as they come up as we go through this session. Also, There's a chat function as well. Chat is for comments. If you want to make comments and drop some comments, absolutely feel free to use the chat button. There's one more thing I want to share with you before we move into the content. Because we're coming to you across the region and many different languages where English may not be the spoken language that you have, it could be a second language or maybe even a third language that you have. You see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, CC, show captions. If you click on that, you can actually, or you click on the up arrow, I should say. If you click on the up arrow, you can see you can have the captions and translations for you as you need them, whether it's English or anything else. You can see there's a ton of languages you can have in terms of captions, and also the transcript that is there available for you. Okay, let me just close that down. And now, my pleasure in bringing on our two experts. So, Mark and Ilan, I'm going to go to you first, Mark. Tell us a little bit about MeetBee and how you developed your knowledge and expertise around this virtual communication.
Andre, thank you so much. Well, MeetBee is a startup that was founded in 2020, and our focus is streamlining virtual meeting and webinar tasks, which allow governments, corporate education, as well as multinational organizations, make sure that they show up for success when it comes to their virtual meetings. Now, a quick background around myself. I come through from the background in television, having anchored national news for over 10 years, and in association to that, I've also been facilitating across the world for Fortune 100 companies on the value and importance in how we can have the best presence and the best ability to get our message across here in this virtual platform, taking all that knowledge together and looking through that lens to make sure that when we're in Zoom, in Microsoft Teams, or any other platform, that we really shine and really have maximum impact. And what you had heard there is referencing the focus around what we call at MeetBee supported meetings. When meetings are high stakes and the stakes are high, you would like to have that support. But what we're doing here today is around the focus of what we describe as unsupported meetings. When your salespeople have to be in front of a client and they don't have the luxury of someone alongside them managing all the, shall we say, technical stuff without being too technical. And this is where let me introduce to you Ilan, who can tell you a bit more around what we reference around the aspect of unsupported meetings. Ilan?
Thank you very much, Mark. And you probably would have noticed that both Mark and I have got South African accents, even though he is in the Czech Republic. He does come from South Africa originally. We do hope that you won't hold that against us. Yeah, Mark is quite right. We started this business about 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic, when we saw an opportunity for a whole lot of virtual meetings that needed support. And of course, if you look, if I give you the 50,000 foot view, as Mark pointed out, you do have a bunch of meetings that do need support in them, but there's a whole bunch of meetings that don't have the luxury of having somebody to support you in them. And that's where this all came about, where we actually scratched our heads and said, I think there's an opportunity over here for people to learn a little bit more about how to use some of these features and functions, which are all there, but all too often unused.
Fantastic. Ilan, I'm going to call you on that, buddy, and ask you to give everyone their first practical takeaway from today, something that they can use right now.
Oh, that's a great idea. I think what I want to do is just show you something that I think is one of the simplest things. Some people might know about it, but in the event that you don't, I do find I'm still amazed all these years later of having worked in the virtual world for over 10 years now, how many people don't know this. But I'm going to share my screen over here. In fact, I'll share a portion of that and show you this. You can see my screen over here. This is what our typical Teams setup looks like. And I know a lot of us use Teams, even if we are in Zoom today. You know how it goes. Your meeting starts and that little red dot shows up next to your name at the top over here, showing that you are busy over here. But of course, just because you're busy doesn't mean that you're getting those annoying sort of notification messages in the bottom right of your screen. In fact, if you're like any normal person, you've probably already got one or two as I'm speaking to you right now. So this is something that you can do. It's quite easy to do. You just click on that, your icon at the top over there. Instead of saying busy, you click on do not disturb. And when you do not disturb, it just stops and mutes all those messages that pop through at the bottom of the screen over there. And it's actually quite amazing what a difference it makes to you. Of course, I do want to remind you that you probably want to turn it back on to available at the end of it. Otherwise, you may never get another one of those messages again, which, depending on how many of them you get in a day, might be a good or a bad thing. But that's something that I definitely wanted to share with you about just making sure that you be and remain more present. Many of you may have taken some of the presence courses through Aerial Australasia. And the interesting thing is that we talk about presence and how to have it and how to make sure that you stay focused, but there's a lot of technical things that kind of get in the way. And there's something else that I actually want to share with you, if I may, Andre.
Sure.
I'm going to share a different screen over here. And this is something that not a lot of people are aware of. It's something that came about inside of Zoom and some of the platforms last year. I'm going to share my main screen. So what you're seeing right now is all three of us on the screen over here. I'm sharing my Zoom screen. And if you go over here to the captions, you mentioned this in the beginning, but not everybody knows how to activate this. So if I click on the show captions up arrow over here, then you'll see over here that I can actually have a live translation. And for example, if I'm in a country where maybe English is not my first language, I want to have the benefit of seeing the English and then seeing it in my local language. All you have to do is click on the caption settings over here and just say always show the caption. Well, you can always show the captions or show the original and the translated ones in the meetings. Caption menu over here, and then watch what happens over here. I can click over here and then say show the original and translated. Now, when I do that, and then I click on show captions over here, now suddenly I start to see all the English show up, as well as the particular language that I've chosen. And there are, as you saw, a myriad of different languages that you can choose over here, no matter where you are in the world. And this just helps those people, for example, that aren't quite as familiar with the language that's being spoken in the meeting or webinar, just get more familiar and feel more comfortable. And I think that that's what is a critically important part of being able to use these tools to our full advantage.
Wow, that's amazing, Elan. Elan, do they have a translation for Australian?
No, unfortunately not. I'm just doing my absolute best to understand everything that you're saying right now. Thanks, Andre.
Thanks, Elan. Cheeky. Okay, well, let's go back to the content. Why do we even offer this webinar, Mark?
Great question, Andre. And I think what we can appreciate is where it came from you and happened around 2 years ago, where you had approached us with a particular need from one of your clients focused in the healthcare sector. And what they had found was that their particular salespeople post-pandemic were finding that the doctors that they normally would communicate with in person felt that, well, I think it works quite well. And we know that's happening across different industries where your potential clients still want to meet virtually. It's just a convenience factor. And in that particular scenario, you found with the client that you were referencing that they were meeting in combinations of Zoom as well as Microsoft Teams to these doctors. And they were experiencing a lack of confidence, a lack of ability where they were very proficient salespeople when they were meeting in person. But when they were meeting virtually, they were losing their touch, so to speak. They weren't able to identify how do they share? If they have to demonstrate a product, do they put their product like right next to their face when they're communicating? How are they able to create that form of effectiveness in the platform tools so they keep the same level of professionalism they would do in the in-person environment? And at the time, we created a bespoke program for you, Andre, and for that potential client with a great deal of success, because the big thing was they wanted to push the needle in coming across in the way they would like to, and really making sure that the quality level of that company really reflects in the same way as they appear on screens. That was a very exciting moment, and we took that, ran with it, and we were able to design this particular program, which is now rolling out across Australasia.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And that we got some amazing feedback from that and other programs that we have run based on exactly what we're talking about. So we're talking about screens and, communicating on screen. And I know from having conversations with a lot of people, there is, there's some anxiety people often face when they are on screens, and particularly when we first went into lockdown, there was a lot of anxiety because of the amount of screen time we had. So, Elan, what can you share about, this issue of anxiety and screens?
Yeah, it's a very good point. If you think about how you normally have a face-to-face meeting, you're not always in front of a mirror and having your own reflection reflected back to you. I think that could be very distracting. And of course, that's what we experience all the time in these virtual platforms. So there are some settings that you can change for yourself. And again, I'm constantly amazed that most people don't know some of these secrets over here, but I'm going to share a couple with you right now. So let me share my screen, and I'll show you that at the top right of the screen over here, you all see that view button, right? But did you know that you can actually hide your self view? So right now I'm seeing myself and you're seeing me too. If I hide my self view, I disappear from me, but you can still see me. And it really brings a whole sense of lowering the anxiety levels, because now I'm not so concerned with how I'm looking or coming across, or where did I get this extra wrinkle from that I didn't notice a couple of days ago. And now I can really focus back on my audience. Same thing, if I want to show it again, I can always just click on view and then show the self view again. Now, there's also another thing that's quite a helpful thing, and that is when you are in a meeting, you know how it normally goes. Andre, you would have you join a little bit before the client, and then the client joins afterwards, and maybe there's 1, 2, or even 5 people that you're meeting with, and you want the person who might be the decision maker, who's like last to the meeting, because of the nature of these platforms, it puts them down at the bottom right of the screen, and you want to make sure that person doesn't feel like, oh, I popped in at the end, so I'm the least important in the meeting. Where you are on the screen does have a sense of giving a sense of your status. So what I would suggest to do is something that we call following the host order. Now, we're in a webinar, Zoom webinar, so it's automatically, you can see here, following the host view, which is me in this case over here. But if you're in a normal meeting inside of Zoom, you can actually activate that in a normal Zoom meeting. And what it means is that if I drag, let's say, Andre, you came into the meeting last right now, you're at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to bring you straight up to the top over here. And as I do that, everyone else is going to see the same thing, right? I can lower myself over here or hide myself, so I'm not really showing a position of dominance or anything like that. And it really does it's a subtle thing, but it's often the subtle things that make a huge difference. It also, to be perfectly honest with you, I really like it because my webcam is at the top of my screen, and I don't like looking down to see where the most important people are on the screen. I want to make sure that I can really just look into your eyes on the screen and then still be looking into the webcam. So it helps to do that too.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elan. Thanks for a couple of important points over there. And we're going to come across a whole lot, I expect, Elan and Mark, as we go through this session. There's a whole lot of giveaways. But let's just quickly dive into the training, because we've talked about the training, we talked about it. What are some of the learning outcomes? And how is the training conducted, Mark, that you mentioned before?
Andre, thank you. And we want to give you an idea of what will the course outcome be should you choose to enable this for your organization. So let's bring up the agenda, and what you'll see throughout this webinar are different ways in which we can share. We'll show the agenda for you, but specifically in referencing the agenda, we're highlighting what we have gone through as the introductions. And we also have been focusing on some tips and tricks that Elan has been bringing. You'll see a little bit later on in this webinar, we'll be bringing you more tips, more tricks, as well as the Q&A. So when we talk about that, the outcomes of this particular program, it's very specific for your organization. What we've also designed around this is the mindfulness around bringing something that can be done, and 2 hours later, your client-facing and sales people will almost immediately be equipped to take these different tips and techniques and tricks to utilize in their next meeting. You'll see there, it's a 2-hour virtual program, while at the same time, we're mindful on 4 key bullet points around how we can create a lasting impression the ideas and the skills that you learn in this particular program will be applicable in your very next meeting. However, at MeetMe, we're also very mindful that these programs change. What they were like during the pandemic have actually changed quite a lot where they are right now. So we're also mindful that if you have a cohort that decides to sign up in the next month, in 6 months' time, all the additional features in your chosen platform, whether it's Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, whatever you would like, we would be very mindful in showing that next cohort all the updated techniques and how they're able to use that particular platform. And then when we talk about how we can present and share specific products or services, some products are tangible, physical items, while some you can present in perhaps a PDF or a PowerPoint. You'll see in the way I'm sharing right now, in TV land, we call this a butterfly. And what it allows us to do is have us on camera while at the same time you're also able to see the course material. We know very often, especially in Microsoft Teams, when you're sharing presentations, what happens? You tend to disappear in the bottom right-hand side of the screen while your content is showing. You're not really having much of an effect. And as we can appreciate, we have to use the same in-person techniques as we do virtually. And we communicate by expressing ourselves. And we want to make sure we're alongside that particular content. When we think about tangible products, we'll also show you some additional techniques inside that course program in how you're able to present it in a far more effective way, as opposed to trying to put a physical product right next to your face, which would come across in quite an awkward way. As you had heard both Andre and Ilan mention, it's a very complementary program to Ariel Australasia's course content around presence and effectiveness when communicating. We'll utilize that if you are going through that learning journey to create a complete complement for that journey around our Zoom and Teams training for salespeople. And the big thing is, what we'll talk about a little bit later in this webinar, is you as a sales director, you also want to feel, especially when your salespeople are communicating virtually, that you can manage this effectively. And we'll be talking about some of the tools that you can use that allows you to have a great overhead view of not only what they say, but also how they're saying it, and some of the elements that you can perhaps provide during feedback sessions with them in how to push the needle forward and making them even better in their next virtual sales call. When we think about our approach, we're mindful that we've taken all the best in-class techniques that you find in Zoom, in Teams, and any other chosen platform. But at the same time, we want to identify your most pressing problems and issues in your organization. We'll have an opportunity to meet with you so we can tweak and make the program as specific to your outcomes as an organization. At the same time, also identify the most appropriate tools that you would like to have implemented when you are engaging in those virtual sales calls, together with the recommended third-party apps that can be utilized in association and combination with your sales calls to really make sure that your salespeople are arriving there with full presence, full interest, high and great listening, but most importantly, being ready to service the customer in the best way possible. As experts, you'll have myself and Ilan there together with our team, which will be able to bring it in your region, whether it's in the subcontinent all the way through to parts of Australasia. So that gives you an idea, Andre, of not only the learning outcomes, but giving your audience an idea to see different ways of what we were doing. We had shown you some on-screen techniques with the agenda. We showed you how you can share, where you have a butterfly shot. So all the different ways that we're doing right now are part of the how-tos that they would experience during the course. Andre?
Yeah, fantastic. Ilan, anything you did want to add to that while you've been a bit quiet?
Oh yeah, well, I'm just enjoying the show over here, Andre. I think Mark put it beautifully. I think, much like the Ariel type of content, it's experience, and we want, I think, you to experience, everyone who's watching here, to experience what it is that you can do. A lot of people don't know that some of these things exist. And I think it really comes down to confidence and competence. I mean, what we've experienced, that people who are involved in client-facing activities or sales, they're often very, very confident and very competent in the client's product or service, but not so much in the delivery mechanism, which is how we're here inside of Zoom. And I want to use a metaphor. It's kind of like if you went to a board meeting, right? All dressed up in your jacket, but there you are wearing your board shorts and your thongs, right? It doesn't necessarily give off the best impression, and that unfortunately, first impressions count. So fortunately or fortunately, so we want to make sure that when you have that opportunity, we know how hard it is to fight to get that appointment, to get to see the decision maker. You want to make sure that that moment counts and that you have the highest chance of success. So that's what I really wanted to think about. And it reminds me of something that Ariel does teach in all of its programs, which is just the concept of intention. I always say, what is the intention? I often ask salespeople, how did your presentation go? And especially if it's on one of the virtual platforms, they go, well, I got through it. And I go, oh, really? Was that your intention? Did you just want to get in and get out and escape the scene of the crime as quickly as possible? Or did you maybe want to achieve something? Did you have some sort of outcome that you wanted to achieve? So I would ask again, what is the intention of having the virtual meeting? Is it to demonstrate expertise? Not, if you can have a wonderfully technical product, maybe in the medical field, but if you don't even know how to unmute yourself or how to share something, all that experience just falls flat.
Thanks, Elon. Hey, I love that metaphor about showing up with board shorts and thongs at a management meeting. And it's interesting, if you kind of think about what's going on in the world right now, as I see it, your clients are having meetings with many vendors and suppliers. So they're not comparing you to them, they're comparing you to everybody else. And it may be another company, a competitor of yours, or it may be a supplier to them. So they are looking at the best virtual communications that come up. And if you're not there at the top, you're missing a great opportunity because the comparison is against everything and every virtual meeting they're having. Okay, so let's talk about some other things that we can look at and what's covered. Mark, I'm going to push it over to you again, just to talk about maybe some things that might be really funky for people to know about.
Andre, well, perhaps the first thing that you may have all seen when you came into this webinar is that both Andre, Ilan, and myself, we have got what we describe as additional information here in the lower third of our screen. In TV terms, we describe it as strap lines, also the lower third as I was using. But what it does allow you to do is come across as professionally as possible when you're entering a particular meeting. This is a feature that is available in Zoom, soon to be available in Microsoft Teams, and it can provide information such as your name, your title, as well as where you're located from. You had heard that I'm arriving here at just after 4 a.m. in the morning, my local time. And by doing that, I also can give you some information around perhaps that's right. It's not only 4 a.m. local time, but it's also a bit wet outside. Thankfully, I'm available for you inside for this potential webinar. It also provides an opportunity for your potential clients to get an idea in a very casual way. Well, there is the LinkedIn, there is some of our social media. We don't necessarily want to overtly come across by saying, oh, by the way, you need to go and find me my LinkedIn page. It seems a bit awkward, but in a nice way, and prompting over here can be very effective indeed. Another thing that I had showed you earlier, but it is also very effective when we go through a meeting, is reminding our audience exactly where we are. And we had spoken about the agenda a few moments ago. Well, what we had finished and completed are our learning objectives. So we can also tick that off the list. What that does for our audience is knowing that we're also on track, we're not wasting their time, and we're making sure that we're adding incredible value for their meeting. But as we know, similarly, there are different things that we want to try and cover. And sometimes it could be perhaps some comments that you may see on screen that you may want to leave there without having to be overt in getting your potential customer to ask you that potential question.
Yeah, Mark, if I can interject, I've noticed that at the top there, it says I should ask you about virtual meeting AI. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I'm so glad you're actually asking this, Ilan, and it comes up a lot when we're having our client calls. And AI is the buzz term for the last year, and we know how it potentially has helped your organization in a multitude of ways. Platforms such as Zoom, as well as Teams, have also implemented their own versions of AI, what they call the chat-enabled functionality with regards to AI here in Zoom, or Copilot available in Microsoft Teams, depending on your organizational rollout. They all are focused on three key elements: transcripts, the aspect around what takeaways should come through, as well as what potential questions that were asked. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what? That is okay. That is kind of useful from a personalized point of view. The thing is, though, as a sales director, you would like to have a complete overview, as we were talking about earlier in this webinar, of what your salespeople are focused and are looking at. So what you really want to have is specifically a AI note taker, which we recommend in our organization, that makes a much more impactful way of what you can do in taking certain takeaways out from your salesperson's client call. So let's talk a bit more about what that report would look like. And as you'll see as one of the sample reports that I brought up on screen, you also want to get sentiment. You're going to need an idea around what was the engagement aspect in that particular meeting. Was it effective? Was it also perhaps the type of meeting where you were finding that your salesperson maybe was talking a bit too much, and you want to get an idea from that particular report, what was the level of engagement? What perhaps was the percentage of time that you found that the audience maybe had their camera off, or even your own salesperson had their camera off? You won't believe how many sales calls I come through to where they're off camera. And I'd imagine that you want to be on camera for those important conversions. My favorite one, however, is this last one. It's only a sample of some of the reports that we're able to provide to you and recommend you implement in your organization. And that gives you an idea around the speed. I know that I have been caught out by speaking a bit too fast. It's my voiceover background, but we want to make sure that your messaging is coming across as an effective way possible. So you're able to have these feedback sessions with your salespeople and saying, well, based on this report, we're noticing that you're speaking at 200 words a minute. And while it may get your message across, how much of that is being translated and understood by your audience? The big takeaway around this type of AI report is that you, as a sales director, are able to get this kind of knowledge and this kind of information at a glance while looking at all your salespeople and getting an idea immediately of whether they were hitting the right points in their sales calls.
Wow. That is, I mean, we talk about AI and the sophistication that is bringing us, but to be able to calibrate the quality of the communication, that is something else. And I think because with Meetbee and Ariel Australasia looking at it, we've learned so much about how we communicate by just looking at those AI reports. Thanks so much, Mark, for taking us through that with AI. So, Eland, over to you. Who might benefit most from this training?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I would say anyone, Andre. It's something that I think that most people in organizations do need to be more familiar with, and just the ability to just click on a link and jump into a virtual meeting doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be effective in those virtual meetings. But I would say that we're looking at the whole tree as such. The lowest hanging branches for an organization is probably your sales force or people who are client facing. That's why we sort of decided to start there, because the results are measurable, right? Because you can see immediately how many more sales meetings result in positive results. And of course, that's the medicine for any organization. If you want to improve the health of any organization, improve the sales. So that's why we thought it would be best to start over there. I think, as Mark also mentioned, it's really helpful for, when you've got the buy-in from the sales manager and the whole team, because the sales manager is learning about these types of things. And to be honest, I don't know many sales managers who have the time to not only worry about their own products, but also about how best to use these platforms. As Mark said, there's so many changes going on all the time. We, over the last couple of years, have seen dramatic differences and changes. And not all platforms are the same, too, to be perfectly honest. They generally have similar products or features, but not everyone operates in the exact same way. It really takes somebody knowing a bit about all of the different types of platforms to be able to say, this is what's going to be working best in your specific situation. So I do say, to go back to your question, who could this benefit? Salespeople, client-facing people, account managers. Anytime you have to have a customer interaction, I think that's probably the the sort of the sweet spot right now for people who could use this training the most. But let's not forget also that there are people that are trying to move up in the organization. And you could say that, that's internal sales in a way, because you're trying to sell yourself, the most important product of all. And so like when people need to go into interviews, they want to put their best foot forward. They want to show that they're competent, they're confident, they know what's going on. It could be something really helpful for people in that situation too.
Yeah. Thanks, Ilan. And it's so refreshing to hear that, because and the evidence, I guess, to back up what you said, not that I doubt it, but that client that we mentioned right at the start, that case study, it started off by really focusing on their salespeople and then went to all customer facing people and now across the organization, because they found it so valuable in terms of enhancing communication across the entire business. So yes, fantastic. So how's the training conducted, Mark?
Andre, great question. And we are very mindful that everyone learns differently. And this is still, if you have gone through Aerial Australia's programs, we're very mindful on this experiential learning approach. We learn through doing and through trying. And the big aspect is choosing your chosen platform. And it's always an important question, this, because you may very well be using Microsoft Teams internally, but you may be finding that the large part of your clients or potential clients are utilizing a platform such as Zoom. So you may very well say, well, I actually would like to make sure that my people are not only efficient in Microsoft Teams, but also in Zoom. So we could create 2 separate training sessions, and we like calling it sandboxing. It allows the opportunity for you not only to see some of these tools that we're showing you right here in this webinar, but we'll also give you the opportunity to try out all these different tools so you can get a look and feel how it can work for you, and most importantly, give you an idea of how it can translate to the particular product or service that you are trying to sell. Over the 2-hour point, we'll have communication, we'll have interaction. We're mindful around creating an intimate environment. That's what we learn the most when the group isn't too big. So this particular training program, we're looking at cohorts of upwards of 14 to 16 people over 2 hours. You get an opportunity to also jump into breakouts where you can try some of these different tools, as well as having, obviously, either myself, Ilan, or one of our other facilitators who are very competent on this particular subject to give you different elements of guidance and how you can utilize these tools most effectively in your next sales call.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. That's fantastic. And it's interesting, as we're talking over here, there's a huge thunderstorm going on in the background, which I'm not sure you've even heard coming through over here, which is sort of come over Sydney as we speak. So all of the Sydney-siders that might be on this webinar will know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, that you can't plan for that, can you? And sometimes when we go into these meetings, because we're working from from home in this hybrid model or remotely, we have all these plans on making sure that we show up in the best, but we have these interruptions and distractions. Someone, using a lawnmower or a drill that's going through next door. The kids decide that they want to, have an argument. These are all of the things that happen that distract us and sometimes makes things a little bit awkward. Yeah. How do we deal with that, Ilan?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the thunderstorm. In Johannesburg, we have a lot of thunderstorms too. So I'm always conscious, Andre, like, oh my gosh, does everyone in my virtual meeting think that the world is ending? Because sometimes it feels like it or sounds like it. And, all of these platforms have come a long way over the last couple of years, Andre, to the point where the noise cancellation is pretty amazing. If you have it enabled, of course. And I discovered this the other day in one of the platforms. It's so effective. You know what a raspberry is? Like when you do that with your lips and like that, right? So I want to show you something. Look how amazing it is in terms of being able to remove noise in the background. I'm going to do one for you now. Watch how the noise cancellation works over here. Did that come through much at all over there? Or
It
did you
didn't.
see my
I
lips?
saw your lips go blurry, and that was
Go
it.
blurry, yeah. Always fun if you do that with a slow motion camera on your phone. That's even more hilarious. But yeah, that's one of the things that not at all exactly. So it's pretty amazing how it cancels that out. And what I want to do is I want to share with you, just in case you haven't got that enabled, I'm going to show you here. I'll share my screen. And in case you haven't already got it enabled, you want to go down here on the bottom left where your up arrow is and go to the audio settings over here. And under the audio profile, that's where you'll get that background noise suppression. Now, there's a lot of different types of settings. I've got mine set to high because I've got a 5-year-old, Andre, and he loves to just barge in or make noises in the room next door. And so I have to have it on high over there. But that's how you set it all up. And it can also, again, you know how it is. Virtual meetings can be stressful. You're worried about your connection, your presentation. Is the client going to be interested or not? So you want to remove as much of that anxiety as you possibly can, and knowing that you've got these things set up so that you don't have to test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You know that you've gone through the settings check and everything, and you can come across in the best possible way. And
fantastic.
There's actually something else that I just thought about that I might want to share. Can I share one other tip that I think is something really important?
Go for it, Elan. I love it when you share. I love it when you share things off the cuff, because I always learn something really exciting.
You know what happens, Andre, is that I've made so many mistakes in these virtual meetings over the years that I feel like it's my duty almost to protect people from making some of the same ones. And one of the biggest ones that I've seen is when people share their screen rather than sharing an application. Now, this happened to me some years ago. I was in a meeting with some colleagues and clients, and the one gentleman started sharing his screen, which was fine, except for the fact that when he stopped sharing his screen, he didn't push stop share. And he then went off camera while other people were talking, and he went on to do his internet banking. So we sat there like almost with our mouths agape over here, going like, look at this, and then like sort of secretly going, I wonder what his balance is. No, I shouldn't be looking. I shouldn't be interested. And we were kind of just watching what was going on. And it's all because he shared the screen rather than sharing the application. Of course, when you share an application, you close the application, it stops the sharing instantly. And I mean, it could be extremely embarrassing, you know, Andre, if you share a screen like this, and people start to see what you were sharing or what you were Googling just minutes before that. You know, I wouldn't want anybody to see that. So that could be a little bit embarrassing if I did something like that. So I would always caution you, share the application, not the screen, at any given opportunity.
Elan, yes, thank you. And you do need to put some effort into that, my friend.
I do need to do that. Yeah, you're right. It would be terribly embarrassing if I forgot to take my own advice.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah, I've learned that through the School of Hard Knocks as well, in terms of sharing the application, not sharing the screen. And yes. So, okay, so how soon could we get started on a course like this, Mark?
Well, I think you may appreciate what Andre had said earlier, that preferably before your competitors do. And as the old adage and saying is, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time to plant a tree is now. Well, keeping in mind today's fast-paced world and sales isn't easy. We know it's tough. But we've been doing this as a remote-only virtual company since the beginning, and we're very mindful that it's best practices that take you over the line. How do you come across? Well, that's important these days, and we want to make sure that you're set up for success. So make sure that if you find an interest in this particular program around Zoom or Teams training for salespeople, client-facing people, that you contact Ariel Australasia today. I think it still has some time today, if not first thing tomorrow morning, just to find out how they can assist you. This is a program brought to you by MeetBee with Ariel Australasia. So we want to make sure that you're all ready for it, and you can get in touch with Andre and his team as soon as you would like.
Fantastic. Okay, there's some questions. I've just looked at the Q&A panel, everyone. I think that's a good place to maybe just pause for a bit, Mark and Elan. What do you think? And maybe just have a look.
Absolutely.
We've got 15 minutes to go before we due to finish. So I thought it may be worthwhile looking at, a little bit more focused things that we could do. So the first question we've got from one of our anonymous attendees is, can't we just look up all of this information on Zoom or Teams website themselves? Can't we?
Well, I'd love to answer that if I may, Mark. I think that many of the features are available to look up. You can look this up on YouTube. You can do this on the site itself. Zoom particularly has a wonderful support site, but they don't necessarily frame it from the point of view of somebody who's presenting or trying to use it to sell. And in addition, there's so many things that Zoom offers, but there's also the additional, or Teams for that matter, there's all these additional applications that fit in and work together with the program. And there's just no way that you can really, especially, it's a lot of piecing a lot of things together. You could take a long time to do it, or you could just come to an organization such as ours that has taken the time to find the best features and best applications and see how they all work together with your chosen platform. So, because Mark and I have a background in presenting, in facilitating, in selling, and in running a business, we have that mindset of helping you to find the best approach to utilize these different platforms for your success.
I agree with you, Elon. I think perspective and context makes such a difference when it comes to learning. Because if we are client facing, we really do have a particular angle that we are trying to focus in on rather than just on the tech. The tech is really important, but it's also bringing that client perspective in, which is so. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I could see that Mark, I think, also wanted to add something to that. Mark, do you have any perspective on your side?
Yeah, the big key takeaway is there's a plethora of videos out there on YouTube which you can go and watch, but really what you're hearing both Andre and Ilan is the context of it. It comes across in a very technical or sanitized way, but we're specifically looking through the lens of how we can come across effectively on screen by utilizing some of these techniques, that the information could be partly out there, but it's not designed in a way that is looking through the lens of a sales or client-facing person. You could technically have the opportunity of going, well, we can read about how the different forms of share work, but we won't get the applicability of what the impact is if we use this form of sharing versus this form of sharing. And then the other nuances around quality, how you're able to use something like spotlighting, which we're doing right now, which gives your audience a high quality version of you. It's something which you wouldn't know, but spotlighting is connected to the HD toggle if it's available in your organization to make sure that you come across as effectively as possible. It kind of almost leads into some other questions in the Q&A, Andre, as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, these are questions coming through, everyone. So let's take the next one, which is, what about your background? What about your backgrounds appear quite casual versus a corporate background? What are your thoughts?
If I can just jump in, and I know that Ilan will want to make a few references on this, but you may see that all three of us have got these are natural backgrounds behind us, and we put some time and some effort into it. You be the judge in how it comes across for you. Do we seem more professional? Do we seem like we know what we're talking about? But if you had to take us from a completely different scenario, whether our background was blurred or we were using a virtual background, how would that come across? It makes me think of a particular informal study that the Harvard Business Review had conducted a few years ago. It was a straw poll, so it wasn't anywhere near scientific, but they were trying to identify whether using virtual or blurred backgrounds reduces your level of authenticity when you are meeting virtually. And they found, over a poll over several thousand people, that it seemed as though your authenticity levels reduced if you were hiding your background or using a blurred background. I like to take it a step further, but we often say we use a blurred background because we don't want anyone to be distracted. But I don't know about you, but when I have a blurred background and I'm seeing certain hues of reds and blues and greens and certain obscure shapes, I start becoming curious and I actually become more distracted. And to add to that part of what we'll talk about during the program is some of the best practices you can use with your potential background, because they could be conversation starters. As a salesperson or a client-facing person, you may find it to be incredibly challenging to sometimes create a bridge between the person you're meeting. You may very well have your university, should we say, colors or flag in your background, and would you believe the client go, oh, I went to the same university, and you start sparking a conversation. And the majority of your time, as you very well know, if you can talk about something else and already create that rapport and genuine connection with somebody else, that takes you already over half the way in trying to sell and trying to convert. I want to give it over to Ilan, because the third aspect is using perhaps plain backgrounds, which you may experience in your so-called corporate environment, and you're starting to wonder, could I perhaps jazz it up? I know Ilan came from that background. Even though we're so similar in many ways, we're also very, very opposite. And one of the things that took me 3 years to do is to convince Ilan to go from a plain background to what is now, I would say, a beautiful background. Ilan, tell us
Thank
that.
you. Oh, thank you, Mark. Well, look, so just in case it's not beautiful and I really have to like jazz it up even more, I can always steal your background over here and just put that one in there too. That's using a virtual background over there of a photo that I took. But what I wanted to say is, I used to, the way my office was set up in my home, it had like a door in the background. And what would happen is people would walk in and out the door during my virtual meetings. It was a little bit distractful, obviously, to anyone that might be there, especially to me. I was always anxious who was going to come through the door. And so what I did is I went and got these like desk dividers, the ones that you would have in a normal office, but I got really tall ones, and I put them on wheels and made like a letter, like a V, so that they would sit behind me. And then what I did was I would wheel them in. I used to keep them over here in my office, and I'd wheel them in behind me, and I'd make this pure black background. And everyone used to say, like, where are you? Are you in space? And everything. I'd wheel it back and say, no, I'm actually here. Look. And that was sort of the only solution that I could come up with at the time. But I do really appreciate what, Mark even taught me some things about background and said, it's a great conversation starter. There's my guitar over there. That was my grandfather's. And when people see that, sometimes they go, oh, you play guitar? And we start really creating some rapport about that. And I think it's something that can really show a little bit more of you, in the world where things are purely transactional, and virtual meetings have the potential to be purely transactional. We've always, you've always said it, Ariel, Andre, we're trying to get more of that deeper connection. And that's really what, the presence programs, the storytelling is all about, all those different programs that you offer. So I think that the background is a story. It's telling a little bit more about you. So I appreciate what I've learned about how you can enhance that and make it even better and actually assist you.
And Ilan, I know you're a very humble person because you've talked about your guitar, but you have not spoken about the picture of you shaking hands with Nelson Mandela, which is
that old thing. Oh, Andre, yeah, I did have that was a special moment, and I always tell people that actually, funnily enough, that was the moment that I really understood what presence was, Andre, because it was quite a thing to be in that room. But it's something that I would say reminds me that no matter whether you're in a room face to face with people or you're in a virtual room, you have the opportunity to create a great impression, to have great presence. And that's what this is all about, really. We want to make sure that people have a connection with you, especially when you're in a client-facing situation.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to selling or client interaction, it is people to people. And we've kind of sanitized it so much. And it's when we stop meeting face to face and going to virtually, there's so much information that was no longer available. But actually having a background like you have, Mark, you have Ilan, as I have over here with my guitar and my Terracotta Warriors and things like that, it is a conversation piece for people. Okay, we've got some questions, everyone. You spoke of rate of speech. What is the ideal rate of speech, considering some of our sessions involve people from different language preferences?
Let me jump in on this, and I'm going to put on not only perhaps what we normally tend to do, but also my voiceover cap. And a good average should be about, I think, 170 words per minute would be the right sweet spot to come across. But the additional part of the question is around different language preferences. And I'm always very mindful of this. And there's perhaps an additional technique that I utilize when thinking about speaking to audiences where English is a second language or even English is a third language, and be mindful on speaking slower. Not only will it help your audience hear you out better, it's going to help the caption that we had showed you earlier on in this webinar to interpret you better. And if you're noticing, Ilan had mentioned this, that we get anxiety, we get nervous when we have to present. And what did Ilan had said earlier? That we just want to get over and done with. A lot of us tend to feel that way. And when you're noticing this particular situation happen to you, I like referencing the enunciation technique, being mindful on speaking as clearly as possible by making sure we focus on pronouncing every bit of our sentence from the beginning to the end. By doing that and putting that in your mind, it's a natural regulator of your speech to slow you down, because in the end, we want to communicate and not confuse. And if our audience and our potential client is not really understanding what we're saying, it's going to dilute your message and perhaps not allow that for that well-deserved conversion. So the rate of speech is important. You would have seen in that particular report, I was edging around 180 words a minute. So I'm still mindful that I have parts to learn. I'd like to try and get it down a few percentage points lower. And that's the effective thing about using our particular recommended note-taking tool. Hopefully that answers the question, Andre. I'm also mindful there's a few more questions in the chat box, and we only have a few minutes left in this webinar. So let me give it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, thank you so much about speech. I would love to be able to calibrate my speech, and I think I will from the next AI report I get. Okay, next question. Are these features we've talked about available on Teams and Zoom or all platforms?
Yeah, I see that. If I can jump in and just add my 2 cents over there, some of them are only available on Zoom, and some are available. It depends, is the answer. And I think if anyone says that, then here's a little bit of a warning sign. If anyone tells you that they know everything about Teams or everything about Zoom, including us, you should not trust them, right? Because the honest truth is nobody does. There are so many different things that are changing all the time. That it's a constant move. It's like painting a moving train, right? And what I would say is that Zoom is probably the leader in terms of some of these features. They tend to come out with a lot of these things first. Other platforms have copied them, but in saying that, there are certain features on some of the other platforms that are quite unique. That it's just based on the structure of them, how they've been the architecture of the different systems. So it would depend on what your preferred platform is, and we can show you which of these features are available on each of those ones.
You know, if I could just quickly add to that, that I love going down the rabbit hole and identifying all these different features. At Meetbee, we've got the most robust enterprise level accounts across all the different platforms, including preview opportunities. And some of the previews I've been seeing in Microsoft Teams lately are rather impressive, including using AI to redo your entire background live. That's a very interesting feature that I've been testing, and it all comes through in the next few months in your chosen organization's release schedule. So just to kind of like, kind of coattail what Ilan was saying, different platforms have got certain unique features that are only available to them. But as we get them, we're able to look through the lens of how it could be effective in how you communicate virtually, and then show you how you can use that in the most effective way possible for your organization.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Mark, we've only got a couple of minutes left. And thank you, Vipul, for that comment. That's a nice metaphor, painting a moving train. There's one thing I just wanted to bring up because it's something that's come up with me recently, which is in this world that we're living in right now, there's a lot talking about psychological safety and neurodiversity. Any thoughts on any of that? I'm going to go over to you, Ilan.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's something that we've been seeing some of, as Mark mentioned, we always sign up for all the latest features and updates that all these platforms are bringing out. And there are some that we sometimes go, oh, I wonder what that is best used for. Upon further research, we start to discover why it might be useful. And as an example for, as you say, psychological safety, I mean, I personally, and I certainly know Mark doesn't have any problem with being on camera. I was more of I don't really want to be, but I've gotten more used to it over the years. But there are some people that really have extreme anxiety. They don't feel psychologically safe enough to come onto camera, or maybe they have different ways of learning. And so we have to be mindful of that. And there you go. You've just put it on there right now, Andre. And I'm going to activate that too. In fact, I'll show you over here. I'll share my screen as you do it. And that is putting on putting on an avatar. I thought, who would earth would put something on like that before? But there you are. You can choose it and activate it just in the settings over there. And if you do that, it allows you to be on camera without necessarily being on camera. And I think that that's a very useful thing sometimes for certain people. Is it the appropriate thing for salespeople necessarily? No, I don't think it's necessarily the best thing for there. But virtual meetings can be applied to so many different things. And of course, it's not just for sales. If you can find that useful, that's a place where you can use a tool like that can be really helpful to people in that situation.
Ilan, I'm going to cut you short because we've come up to our time, and I just want to let everyone know that I hope you found some real value in the session. Two things we wanted to bring to you. One is to demonstrate some things that shows you some of the potential that's available, but also give you some tips and tricks. As we said, we've covered about 10% in this program. We would love to work with you to elevate your impact when it comes to how you show up on screen. Please get in touch with us at Ariel. And we would love to, work with Ilan and Mark and your organization and your client-facing people to really have an impact on screen. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ilan. It's such a pleasure, and so much appreciate you waking up in the middle of your nights to come together in our region to help us over here. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody else. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you had the choice to do many things. I'm glad you chose us. Talk soon.